She smelled like camphor and palm oil, and the woman in seat 3B decided that was reason enough. Zara noticed the smell the moment she settled into her seat. She had taken the window seat in business class, the one she had saved 3 months for, the one she had circled on the screen with a trembling finger and clicked confirm before she could change her mind. She was wearing her good church dress, the navy one with the white collar that her mother had ironed the night before and hung on the door handle so the wrinkles would fall out by morning. She had her reading glasses in a case on her lap. She had a small container of kontomire stew wrapped in 2 layers of foil and then placed inside a plastic bag because she had learned long ago that airplane food did not agree with her stomach, and she was 68 years old and past the age of pretending otherwise. Her name was Mama Osi, though that was not what they would put in any record, because her real name, the name her parents gave her, was Abena Asantewa Osi, and she had carried that name through 40 years of cleaning other people's homes in London, then 15 years in a row house in Brampton, Ontario, where she grew up tomatoes in the backyard every summer and sent money home every month without fail. She was going to Vancouver. Her daughter was waiting for her in Vancouver. That was the only thing that mattered. The woman in seat 3B was named Celeste Harrington Okafor. That was how she introduced herself to the flight attendant. Both names, all 4 syllables of the last name, enunciated like she was signing a legal document. She had the kind of blonde highlights that cost $800 to look natural, and she was wearing a cream blazer that she had draped over the seat armrest the moment she sat down. She looked at Mama Abena Asantewa Osi the way some people look at a stain on a white tablecloth, not angry exactly. More inconvenienced. "Excuse me," Celeste said, and she did not look up from her phone when she said it. Are you carrying food?" Mama Ose looked at her bag. "Yes, in business class, yes." Celeste finally looked up. She looked at the navy dress. She looked at the reading glasses. She looked at the small bag with the foil-wrapped container, and something passed across her face, something Mama Ose had seen before, in the faces of women who had forgotten where they put their compassion. "I'm going to need to speak to someone," Celeste said. The flight attendant's name was Denise, and she had been doing this job for 11 years, and she knew trouble when she saw it. She came down the aisle with a smile that did not reach her eyes and bent slightly at the waist. "Is there a problem?" "This woman," Celeste said, gesturing without pointing, the way people do when they want to indicate someone without technically being rude, "is carrying homemade food, in business class. It smells." Denise looked at Mama Ose. Mama Ose looked at Denise. "Ma'am," Denise said, carefully, "we do ask that passengers—" "I bought this seat," Mama Ose said. Her voice was quiet. It was the voice of a woman who had raised 4 children and buried 1 husband and sat with her own mother through 3 nights of fever, and it did not shake. "I bought this seat the same as anyone else on this aircraft." "Of course," Denise said. "Of course you did. But if the food is causing discomfort to other passengers, it is not causing discomfort to other passengers," Mama Ose said. "It is causing discomfort to this one passenger who has not yet told me her name." Celeste opened her mouth. "Celeste," she said. "Celeste Harrington Okafor. Okafor." Mama Ose repeated, and there was something in the way she said it, not unkind, not pointed, just present. A recognition. That is an Igbo name. A pause. "My husband's family," Celeste said. The explanation came out before she could decide not to give it. "Then his mother," Mama Ose said, "probably also cooked kontomire stew." She said it simply, as a fact. Then she folded her hands on her lap and looked out the window. But Denise had a supervisor, and the supervisor had been watching from the galley, and the supervisor was a man named Patrick who believed, above all things, in consistency of policy and Patrick decided that the cleanest solution was to offer Mama Osi a seat in economy, where the food would bother fewer people, and he presented this to her as though it were a gift. "We'd be happy to upgrade your comfort in another section of the aircraft," Patrick said, which was the airline's way of saying the opposite of what it sounded like. Mama Ose looked at him. She was 68 years old. She had been on her feet since 4 a.m. She had taken a taxi to the bus to the train to the terminal. She had stood in 3 lines. She had removed her shoes and placed them in a bin and walked through a machine in her stockinged feet while a young man looked at a screen. She had eaten half a sandwich in the terminal because she did not want to be hungry on the plane. She had ironed her good church dress, and she was wearing it right now, and she had paid for this seat. "No," she said. "Ma'am." "No," she said again. Not loud, not angry. The word was a door, shut quietly but firmly, and everyone in the surrounding seats heard it. A few people looked up. One man in 2A had been pretending to read his magazine for the past 5 minutes. A woman across the aisle had her headphones on, but they were not playing anything. Celeste said, in a voice low enough to be private, but loud enough to carry, "This is ridiculous. There are standards." And Mama Ose, without turning from the window, said, "Yes, there are. Here is what nobody in that cabin knew. Here is what Patrick, the supervisor, did not know. And Celeste Harrington Okafor did not know, and even Denise, who was fundamentally a decent person and felt uncomfortable about the whole situation, did not know. The woman in seat 3A had a daughter in Vancouver. The daughter's name was Sola Ose Mensah now, though she had been born Sola Abena Ose, named after her mother's middle name, which was the tradition in their family. The firstborn daughter always carried part of the mother's name forward, like a torch passed in a relay. Sola was 34 years old. She had a 2-year-old son named Theo who called his grandmother on video call every Sunday morning and held up his toy cars to the camera as an offering. She had a husband named David who made very good jerk chicken and had never once made Mama Osi feel like a visitor in his home. And Sola, 3 weeks ago, had been in a car accident on the Trans-Canada Highway, and she had come through it, praise God. She had come through it. But there had been a surgery, and then another surgery, and now she was home, but she was not herself yet. And she was tired in a way that scared her mother, and Mama Osi had packed her church dress and her kontomire stew and her reading glasses, and she had gotten on this plane because her daughter needed her. That was all. That was the whole story, or it should have been. Patrick was still waiting. Mama Osi turned from the window. She looked at Patrick. She reached into the outer pocket of her carry-on bag, and she produced a folded piece of paper, and she unfolded it, and she held it out to him. It was her boarding pass. The seat number was circled in blue pen. She had circled it herself at home the night before, so she would not forget. 3A, she said. Business class. Toronto to Vancouver. Purchased on the 14th of last month. Would you like to see my passport as well? Patrick did not take the boarding pass. No one is questioning whether you purchased the seat, ma'am. Then I will stay in it, she said. And she folded the paper back up and put it in her pocket, and she put her hands back in her lap, and she looked at the window again. The man in 2A turned a page of his magazine. He was not reading it, and then, because God or fate or the particular cruelty of this kind of moment requires a witness, the curtain at the front of the cabin opened. He was in his uniform, 4 gold stripes on the epaulettes, the hat under his arm. Tall, he had always been tall, even as a boy, tall enough that Mama Osi had to buy his school trousers long and fold them up at the bottom until he grew into them. He had his father's forehead and her own eyes, and he was walking down the aisle of the business class cabin with the particular steadiness of a man who was used to being the calmest person in a difficult situation. His name was Captain Ni Ryi Osi. He had been flying commercial aircraft for 9 years. He had not known his mother was on this flight until Denise, good, fundamentally decent Denise, had come to the cockpit door and knocked and told him, quietly, that there was a situation in the cabin involving an elderly Ghanaian woman in a navy dress with a container of food, and something about the description had stopped him, had made him set down his pre-flight checklist and say, very calmly to his co-pilot, "Excuse me for a moment." He walked down the aisle. He saw his mother, and whatever Ni Ryi had been planning to say, whatever calm, professional, measured thing he had prepared on the walk from the cockpit, left him completely. He went down on one knee in the aisle of the business class cabin, in his captain's uniform with the 4 gold stripes, and he took his mother's hand in both of his, and he said, "Mama." No one spoke. Celeste Harrington Okafor did not speak. Patrick did not speak. Denise stood in the galley doorway with her hand over her mouth. The man in 2A put his magazine down. The woman with the headphones took them off. Mama Ose looked at her son. She had not known he was the captain of this flight. She had not known because Ni had not told her, not to surprise her, not as a game, but because she would have worried. She always worried when he flew. She knew, rationally, that he was the one doing the flying, and therefore the one most in control of the situation, but she was his mother, and rationality had never fully penetrated that particular anxiety, and so Nye had learned years ago to simply not mention his schedule. She looked at him kneeling there, her boy, this man who had once eaten her kontomire stew standing at the kitchen counter because he was too hungry to sit down. This man who had called her every Sunday without fail for 9 years. This man with his 4 gold stripes and his father's forehead and her own eyes. She put her free hand on his cheek. "You are going to wrinkle your uniform," she said, and Ni Ryi laughed. A real laugh, not a polite one, and he stood up and he kissed her on the forehead and he turned to look at the cabin. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. "This is my mother," he said. "She is a passenger on this flight. She is sitting in her assigned seat. She purchased that seat and she will remain in it for the duration of this flight." He paused. "I would like to ask that she be treated accordingly." Then he looked at Celeste. Just looked, not threatening, not unkind, just present, the way his mother had looked at Patrick actually, a recognition. Celeste looked down at her cream blazer. Patrick said, "Of course, Captain," and his voice came out smaller than he intended. Ni turned back to his mother. "Is there anything you need, Mama? Before we depart?" "A cup of tea," she said. "If it is not too much trouble." "It is not too much trouble," he said. He went back to the cockpit. Denise brought the tea. She brought it in the good cup, the ceramic one they saved for premium passengers, not the plastic one. And she set it on the tray table with both hands, and she said, quietly, "I'm sorry, ma'am. I should have handled that better." Mama Ose looked at her. Denise was maybe 30, maybe a little younger. She had shadows under her eyes that suggested a long week. "Sit down a moment," Mama Ose said. "I can't. Sit down a moment," she said again. "Not an order, an invitation." Denise sat on the edge of the empty seat across the aisle. "Just for a moment. Do you have children?" Mama Ose asked. "A daughter," Denise said. "She's 4. Then you know," Mama Ose said simply. She wrapped both hands around her tea. "You know that you would get on any airplane, you would sit in any seat, you would carry any food, you would do whatever the day required, because your child is at the other end." Denise was quiet for a moment. "Where are you going?" she asked. "Vancouver. My other daughter was in an accident. She is better now, but—" Mama Ose paused. "But I need to see for myself." Denise nodded. She understood that kind of knowing. The kind that doesn't come through a phone screen. "The stew smells wonderful, actually," Denise said. Mama Osi smiled for the first time since she had boarded the plane. It is kontomire, cocoyam leaves, with palm oil and smoked fish. I packed enough for 2 days because I did not know how long I would need to stay. I hope your daughter recovers quickly, Denise said. She will, Mama Osi said, with the certainty of a woman who had decided this was not a matter for doubt. She is her mother's daughter. Now, before we go further, if this story has reached you, wherever you are watching from tonight, drop your flag in the comments. Let us know where the ancient African folktales family is gathering from. And if you haven't subscribed yet, what exactly are you waiting for? Every story we tell has a lesson woven into it, and we never rush the lesson. But there is more to this story. There is always more. The flight was 5 hours. Celeste Harrington Okafor spent the first 2 of them staring at the screen in the headrest in front of her, clicking through movie options without selecting one. She ordered a gin and tonic and drank half of it. She asked for a blanket and then didn't use it. She thought about Okafor. She thought about her mother-in-law, Emmanuel's mother, Mama Ngozi, who lived in a flat in Lagos and called every Sunday on video, and always asked Celeste if she was eating enough, who sent dried pepper in small bags with every visitor who made the trip, who had cried at their wedding with a joy so complete and unguarded that Celeste, 26 at the time, and not yet sure about crying in public, had cried too. She thought about the last time she had visited Mama Ngozi. She thought about the airport in Lagos, and the drive to the flat, and the smell when the door opened. Pepper and stockfish, and something deep frying, and something underneath it all that was just home, just the specific texture of a woman who had been cooking in the same kitchen for 40 years. She thought about how she had stood in that kitchen doorway once, jet-lagged and disoriented, and Mama Ngozi had looked at her and said, "Sit down, my daughter. I made enough." She hadn't thought about that in a while. She had been busy. She had been working. She had been doing the things you do when your life is structured around forward motion, and you've gotten very good at not looking sideways. She looked sideways now. Mama Ose was reading. She had her glasses on and a paperback open on her lap, and she turned pages slowly, the way people do when they are reading every word. She had eaten some of her stew. Celeste could smell the palm oil, and it did not smell unpleasant. It smelled like Mama Ngozi's kitchen. Celeste picked up her gin and tonic and put it down again without drinking. After a long moment, she said, "Ma'am." Mama Osi looked up over her glasses. "I owe you an apology," Celeste said. The words came out stiff, unpracticed. "I was unkind. I made assumptions, and I involved other people, and She stopped. "I'm sorry." Mama Ose regarded her for a moment, not coldly, not warmly, just steadily. "Why did you marry into a Yoruba family?" she asked, "if you do not respect where they come from?" The question landed without cruelty, but it landed. Celeste opened her mouth, closed it. "I do respect," she started. "Your husband's mother," Mama Ose said, "packed food for her son when he traveled. I would bet anything on that. I would bet this airplane. And somewhere, at some point, you told yourself that was different, that it did not apply to you, that you had moved somewhere those things did not follow." A long silence. "Emmanuel and I are separated," Celeste said. She had not told anyone on this trip. She had not told most people, period, since February. Mama Ose was quiet. "I think," Celeste said slowly, "I've been very angry for a long time, and I've been putting it in the wrong places." Mama Ose reached over. She placed her hand briefly over Celeste's hand. Then she took it back. "Anger is not the problem," she said. "Anger is just fire. The problem is where you aim it." She went back to her book, and Celeste sat in seat 3B and looked at the clouds outside the window and did not say anything else for a while, but something in her shoulders had come down. Something had released. Some door she had been holding shut. They began their descent into Vancouver just before 4 in the afternoon. The city spread below them in the particular gray-green of the Pacific Northwest, mountains behind it, water in front. The whole thing arranged as if someone had decided to prove something about beauty and hadn't stopped until they were satisfied. Mama Osi pressed her face to the window the way Theo pressed his face to windows, without self-consciousness, because a view like that deserved full attention. Her son's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain. We are beginning our final descent into Vancouver International Airport. The local time is 3:52 p.m. The weather is overcast with a temperature of 11 degrees Celsius. On behalf of myself and my crew, thank you for flying with us today." A pause, just long enough. "And to my passengers in business class, thank you for your patience." The man in 2A laughed, a real laugh, surprised out of him. Denise, in the galley, pressed her lips together and looked at the ceiling for a moment. Celeste. Harrington Okafor looked at her hands. Sola was waiting past the arrivals gate. She was in a wheelchair not because she couldn't walk, but because David had insisted and the airport had provided one, and she had been too tired to argue, which told Mama Osi more about how her daughter was really doing than any phone call had. She had a blanket across her lap. Theo was beside her in the pushchair, asleep, his mouth open, his toy car clutched in one small hand. Mama Osi came through the doors and stopped. She had been moving for 14 hours. She had been holding herself together with good posture and a navy dress, and the certainty that her daughter was at the other end. And now her daughter was at the other end, and the certainty could release, and Mama Osi stood in the arrivals hall of Vancouver International Airport and pressed her hand over her mouth and did not make a sound. Sola saw her. "Mama!" she said, and Mama Osi crossed the floor in the way that people cross floors when the reason for their moving is love. Not hurrying, exactly, but purposeful, inevitable. As if the distance between them was just a formality that needed to be resolved. She cupped her daughter's face in both hands. She looked at her for a long time. She looked at the shadows under her eyes and the new thinness in her cheeks and the small scar near her hairline that had not been there before. She looked at all of it, and she memorized it, because that is what mothers do. They take inventory, quietly, without alarm, so they know what they are working with. "You look terrible," she said. Sola burst out laughing, the kind of laugh that is also almost crying. "Mama, I brought kontomire stew, oh thank God, and I am staying until you look like yourself again. How long that takes is up to you." Sola took her mother's hand. How was the flight? Mama Osi thought about the cabin. She thought about Patrick and his solution, and Celeste's cream blazer, and the cup of tea in the ceramic cup, and her son's 4 gold stripes, and the sound of his voice over the intercom saying, "Thank you for your patience," in the way that contained, for those listening carefully, an entire story. "It was fine," she said. "I sat in my seat. I ate my food." She glanced down at Theo, asleep with his toy car. "He has grown. He never stops," Sola said. "Good," Mama Osi said. "That is what they are supposed to do." David appeared from the direction of the parking garage, slightly out of breath, carrying 2 extra bags he had insisted on taking from her at the curb. He had her eyes, not literally, but in the way that people who have spent years loving each other begin to hold their faces similarly. He called her Mama without the qualifier, without the distance of last names, and she had decided the first time he did it that he was a good man. "Mama, welcome," he said. "How was the flight?" She said it was fine, Sola said, and there was something in her voice that suggested she did not entirely believe this. "It was fine," Mama Osi said again, firmly. She reached into her bag. She took out the foil-wrapped container, still warm, somehow still holding its heat, and she handed it to David. Put this in the refrigerator when we get home, she said. Not the freezer, the refrigerator. We'll heat it properly tomorrow. David took it with both hands. Yes, Mama. She adjusted her reading glasses. She looked at her daughter and her sleeping grandson and the man who had married her daughter and called her Mama and taken her bags without being asked. She looked at the arrivals hall with its fluorescent lights and its rolling luggage and its dozens of other reunions happening simultaneously. People embracing, people crying, people holding signs with names, people standing on the tips of their toes to see over the crowd. She had crossed an ocean and then a continent. She had sat in her seat, and she was here. Later, weeks later, after Sola had stopped needing the wheelchair, and Theo had started calling her Mama Bena because he could not yet manage the full name, after David had learned the proper way to pound cocoyam, and Mama Osi had taught him twice, and watched him practice a third time later, Sola asked about the flight again. They were in the kitchen. Theo was asleep. It was past 10 o'clock, the quiet hour when the house exhaled, and Sola was sitting at the table with a cup of tea, and Mama Osi was standing at the counter doing the things she always did in other people's kitchens, making herself useful, finding the spots that had been missed, wiping things down. The flight, Mama, you never told me what really happened. Mama Ose was quiet for a moment. A woman was rude to me, she said, and then she apologized. That's it? And your brother was the captain. She paused. I did not know that, Sola stared. Nee was, Mama. You were on Nee's flight and you didn't tell me? I did not know until we were already in the air. What did he do? Mama Ose put down her cloth. She thought about her son's face when he came down the aisle. She thought about the 4 gold stripes. She thought about the way he had knelt, in his good uniform, in front of everyone, without hesitation, without calculation. Just knelt, because she was there and she was his mother, and there was nothing complicated about it. He knelt down, she said, in the aisle, in front of all of them. Sola was quiet. He held my hand, Mama Osi said, and he called me Mama. The kitchen was very still. That is all he did, she said. He did not raise his voice. He did not make a speech. She looked at her hands. He just made sure they knew who I was. Sola set down her tea. He's been calling me every day since the accident, she said softly. Every single day. He called on the day of the surgery and stayed on the line the whole time, just talking. About nothing. About food and weather and old memories. Just so I would not be alone. Mama Ose picked up her cloth again. He learned that from his father, she said. His father used to do the same thing, sit with people, talk about nothing, until they did not need him to anymore. She wiped the counter. She straightened the dish towel. That is the thing about this family, she said. Not to Sola specifically, but to the kitchen, to the quiet, to the night. We show up, whatever it costs. Whatever we are wearing, whatever we are carrying. She folded the dish towel in thirds, the way she had always folded it. We show up. Now tell us, was the woman right to apologize? Was it enough? Or is an apology on an airplane just words spoken at 30,000 feet, gone the moment you land? Tell us what you think in the comments below. And wherever you are watching from tonight, drop your flag. Let this family know you are here. If you have not yet subscribed to Ancient African Folktales, this is your moment. Every story we bring you carries something worth carrying, and we never forget that behind every woman in a navy dress on an airplane, there is a whole life, a whole world, a child at the other end of a very long journey, because that is always the real story, and a mother always arrives.